Hi, my name is Hannah, and today we will interview Kathleen. Born in Mexico, raised in Switzerland, and educated in Australia, Kathleen is the founder and CEO of Wonders Health. Her company works with digital nomads to financial freedom. She works in such areas as international tax, corporate structuring, and global residency. Today, she gives us her view on key trends as we emerge into a post-pandemic world.
This podcast channel is about you, successful international entrepreneurs, successful expats, successful investors. Sponsored by HCJ Tax. And we're live. Good afternoon, Kathleen. How are you today?
Hello, Derren. I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. It's been a long time since we caught up. So for those who may be watching on YouTube or maybe listening to the podcast, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Kathleen Paolo. I was born in Mexico, raised in Switzerland, and have been living in Australia for the last 6 years. I was an international tax lawyer in my previous career, and now I'm sort of a location independent business owner myself, and I help other digital nomads and entrepreneurs around the world with their international taxes and corporate structures.
Wow, that's amazing. So you are definitely what I would consider like an influencer in the whole digital nomad space, and been doing incredible work as we were talking offline. So could you please tell us a bit more about Wonders Wealth and what it's about and where it's going?
So actually, when I quit my job as an international tax lawyer, I just simply wanted to go and travel. My first stop was Bali, where the digital nomad hub
Yeah.
is basically born. And I ran into all these entrepreneurs who were talking about their taxes and not knowing what to do with their taxes. And I, in my head, was kind of already able to figure out solutions and wanted to present it to them, and got my first clients even before I was really traveling. So that's how Wanderers Wealth was formed.
Mhm.
And that's been almost 2 years ago. And
Mhm.
at the same time, my partner is a travel photographer, travel blogger. We were still traveling full time. We did over 30 countries in
Wow.
only 1.5 years. So it was at a really fast pace,
Yeah.
going from Egypt to Jordan over to Mexico, Guatemala. Yeah, crazy travel itinerary. It was incredible, but obviously my business suffered a little bit because it was very much service based at the time.
Mhm.
So I needed to figure out different time zones when I could see my clients, when I could actually sit down and do my research and do everything I needed to do. So that's why at the beginning of this year, 2020, I came back to Australia just to sort of figure out what I wanted to do with Wanderers Wealth, to what next level I wanted to bring it. And that's when I figured out I needed to create more digital products that didn't need me to be there necessarily. So now I've launched ebooks, I've launched an online course, and yeah, that's been very beneficial for me in my travel back.
Okay, fantastic. And what's your website for those who may be wondering?
Wandererswealth.com.
Wonderswell.com. It's pretty simple, easy to find. So great with that introduction, and given your experience both in depth and in breadth within this space, we're going through, I think, unusual times, and I'll use a cliche, unprecedented times. What do you think that means? What trends? What are the implications you see and you're aware of and you're following?
Mm-hmm. I guess one of the first ones, being part of the digital nomad community and of the now more so remote work community. It's something that has been predicted a while ago, that, you know, more people were going to follow along and jump on that train. And now it's just been so much quicker at a much faster rate that everyone jumps sort of on the remote working community space. Plus also what I'm seeing currently is when digital nomads were more so people in their 20s, 30s, now the remote working community has been enlarged to incorporate people in the 40s and 50s and people who have actually families and, you know, children who are young and who are older. So I've been also involved with the co-working and co-living community and seeing how that's now changing for the future and how possibly co-living and co-working spaces in the future will incorporate nurseries and sort of kindergartens for kids to be able to cater to families who are now able to both work remotely and explore different countries while still working remotely. I think that's one of the biggest changes in these times.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people would agree with you there that, okay, some of these trends they're not caused by this health crisis. They predated it, but the health crisis has served as a catalyst. It has accelerated whatever the case may be. So yeah, definitely the opportunity for people to work remotely and with companies that are like they set the pace for not just online work but in the whole tech space. So when you have companies like Facebook and Google saying, okay, everyone is work from home until at least next summer, it's kind of hard even for other tech companies who were really like old school. They now have to adjust because that's, you know, that is the new normal. That is definitely new normal. But
definitely, yeah. And I think especially like for you and me coming from an industry, you know, whether it's accountancy or lawyers, it's making people aware that really now you sort of need a digital profile. Like gone are the days when, you know, you really cared about being private and not really showing what you're doing. And when I started in law firms and stuff, you know, we were told to not really show what we do in business. We were told to be private about it, not really show up on social media. Whereas now businesses who are really thriving and they really show what they're doing, they're showing their faces and, you know, showing client testimonials and all those sorts of things, which you didn't really think about a couple of years ago. So the online presence is really, strong these days.
Definitely. You know, if you're not online, you're basically invisible, because previously we would have like real seminars, real networking events, real conferences where we'd meet people, exchange business cards, and make connections that would translate into more opportunities. But now those simply do not exist. And how have you responded, and how have you seen people in the digital nomad space responding to that? The absence of opportunities to mix socially and that impact on getting new leads on doing their work.
Yeah, it's very varied, I would say. There's people who, you know, got stuck in the digital nomads hub in Bali, in Mexico, Thailand, or they simply decided to sort of get stuck because that's their home where they sort of felt most at home. Then there's other people who rushed back home and where a lot of them are living back home with their parents, you know, because they didn't really plan for this sort of circumstances. And in terms of tax implications, I guess that's one of the first questions that popped up with everyone, especially those having to rush back home, is like, well, am I going to fall back into tax residency? Do I have to pay taxes now that I'm back home? And for most of the people now, it's almost coming up to 6 months or more that they're already home. So now is, you know, the 183 days are coming up. Everyone's unsure. Do I have to leave or not? Really interesting times. And then we also have the new digital nomad visas that are even more attractive, that could bring new tax implications into play. So
Mhm.
lots happening at the moment, and I feel like we still don't have any clear answers because it's all in the progression state.
Yeah.
But we have guidance from the OECD, you know, who has said it's the unusual circumstances is the sort of force majeure right now that shouldn't make anyone fall into tax residency. But then you've got other individual laws, as always, from countries just saying, well, only up to 60 days will we not, you know, count the days, and
Yeah.
then you'll fall basically in. So it's really a bit of a whirlwind out there, and we don't really know what guidance to take serious and what not. So yeah, it's very interesting at the moment.
Yeah,
What are
definitely.
your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Well, sorry, with the previous point, I mean, we used to like attend lots of networking events and we used to host, but now everything is 100% online, and our team
Mm-hmm.
has had to pivot completely and totally into in terms of raising our online presence across the various platforms. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a huge and steep learning curve for us this year, but I think we're getting some traction in terms of the the triggering substantial presence and PE issues. You know, to your point, it is a case by case basis because some tax authorities, for example, the IRS, HMRC, Luxembourg, HMRC in the UK, Luxembourg, they have issued, and some countries have issued guidance, and some other countries are like, nope, it's lunchtime. Come on, give me some taxes. So it is a a dynamic landscape right now, and more so than before. I think entrepreneurs, particularly those who are doing pretty well, they need to be taking advice, and yeah, and so it creates opportunities for people who play in our space. At the same time, on going forward, you're looking at what's happening with these countries. Every country is basically, pulling out their checkbooks and writing big checks, which means that that money has to be paid back usually at some point in time. And the easiest way to do so is to raise taxes. So I would imagine that very few people are imagining a future with lower taxes. It's probably going to be the opposite, regardless of where you're playing, which means that, again, forward tax planning is not an option. It's a necessity, and with that
Yeah.
comes the whole structuring. So if taxes are going to move in this direction, where am I going to be based? Where's my company going to be? Where should I be? What are my options? And then, and to your point with the visas, the whole immigration space has been thrown out. Uh, with new visas, with old visas being completely ignored, new visas being created, and additional obstacles to movement of talents and people. So everyone who had a strategic plan, everyone who had a playbook, it's basically been thrown out the window, and it's back to basics. It's zero base. Let's start from scratch, given this situation, which some describe as a new normal. I don't, because normal presupposes predictability. Whereas to me, this is post-normal. Anything can change at any point in time. Borders can close and open like that. You know, so
Yeah,
interesting times
yeah.
indeed.
Yeah, when you were talking about going remote and your whole team having to work remote, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think every industry has seen that shift, and it's also interesting to see, for example, banks who they were asking from everyone to meet face to face to be able to do their KYCs and all of that, and slowly after 6 months everyone being like, okay, maybe we'll have some remote video calls in order to get new clients. Like every industry will have to adapt to it in order to push forward and be still profitable and make sure that their operations can run somehow. So that's a very interesting point. And even with clients, and still being able to design strategies, it's still tough, I think, because even though, let's say, for example, Estonia might design really attractive programs, as do other countries, there's still really big limitations to being able to actually travel and to get there, and having to quarantine, and which countries can actually get inside. And so yeah, lots of limitations right there, I guess, with the structuring at the current status and not knowing where it's heading and not knowing what countries will impose. Like, I know there's been a shift upward in property tax rises, even though, you know, like corporate tax rises might fall. Like, so we really are at a crossroad where we're not certain about what's going to happen. Where will countries raise revenues from? There's also, I've seen so many new ideas of new taxes that could exist in the future. I was reading about sort of a micro tax on every singular bank transfer that happens, or even when you pay with Visa and Master debit card, just make it a 0.01% tax, which adds up. Obviously, everyone's going cashless these days, so it's really fun times, I think, to be in the tax industry and to sort of observe those trends and what could happen. And
to your previous point about banking, that is a huge one, I think, because, so for example, those of us who depend on these little tokens, right? You are no longer in country, and your token, the battery dies, or you lose it, it gets broken, or whatever. Basically, that's it. You lost your money, right? Because if you're in Asia, chances are, if you're doing something significant, you're banking in Singapore, Hong Kong. Both of them are close to non-essential travel, so you cannot get there. So, and then they're being like really picky. We have to send it to the address, which is your nominee, and you know, so it's you basically, under some circumstances, you could be locked away from your money. And in terms of the online, you know, we say people who are working remotely, they're working independently. A lot of them run online businesses, and the whole digital tax space, whether it is the, you know, the extension of VAT or GST, or the creation of new sales and use taxes, or digital service taxes, it is created a minefield that is quite difficult to navigate. And I see a lot of people having problems in the future because they have a business model. So, you know, you do your business plan and you work it out, it does look profitable and it does look attractive, and they have completely ignored the tax side of it. And then they play for a while they're small, nobody cares. And then when they rise they above a certain threshold and they begin to garner attention, then they realize that a huge tax bill being thrown at them retroactively. So yeah, it is a challenge as well as an opportunity, depending on how you look at it. There's a lot going on in the space.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find it very exciting. I know you were too, so we're on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel kind of like a guilty pleasure being on the other side of the table, and especially when historically there's been this, whether it's a rumor or a notion or perception that you can somehow survive being tax free. So once you keep moving, you know, perpetual nomad, blah, 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 you can pay no taxes anywhere. And we're seeing increasingly that come back to bite people. Because while in theory, yes, okay, like if you're from one of those countries, one of the few advanced economies now that doesn't follow you around, say Holland, or maybe even Germany, right? And you're moving around, find you've severed tax residency, and you keep moving. At some point in time, you want to go back, right? So you may have opened a bank account in some Southeast Asian country or South America or whatever. And at some point in time, you may want to take that money back into an advanced economy, an OECD nation. So North America, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. And the answer is going to be no. And when we're seeing that, we're seeing people being locked up because, okay, every bank is afraid of the big fines because all banks have faced some serious fines in the past few years. And the AML guys are going to want to know, where did you earn that money? You show them your website, you show them your invoices. That could be faked. Show me a tax return. Show me something from a government that says this money is not drug money, that this money is clean. And then they struggle, they can't. And then they realize, we have, you know, client who was his mom. He's from a European country. I wouldn't say which one. And his mother fell ill, and he's trying to go back home, not
Mm.
just to be with her, but to take care of her financially because there's some medical bills that are piling up. Because they want to do some private stuff, not just government healthcare, and he cannot
Mhm.
bring his money back
Ugh.
because he has no tax returns. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a sad story, but it's not unusual, unfortunately.
No, not at all. Yeah. And sometimes it really, like, I'm part of, many Facebook groups and all of that. And I rarely comment in it just because I see how heated up it can get
Yeah,
and how involved people can get and how
yeah,
opinionated
yeah.
um, it sometimes gets. And it really frustrates me when people are like, oh, yeah, you can just simply do this. And that, like, if it was that simple, you wouldn't need lawyers and like
Yeah.
accountants and a whole team around you
Mm.
who would design those strategies for you. Really, it's not as simple, and really governments, can be quite aggressive in their strategies to sort of, yeah, make you pay or not letting your money access it and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah,
So
those online groups are another thing. So I wouldn't go there that often, but some members of my team would go every once in a while. And I had this thing that every day we use Slack to coordinate our work, right? And every
mhm,
day you're supposed to put either 5 or 10 questions that you've seen in one of those Facebook or LinkedIn groups or on, whatever.
mhm.
And it's amazing. It's amazing, as you say. It's mind-boggling the responses people get, and it's confusing that a human being would trust their financial future, personal
That's the
and their
biggest thing.
business, to some anonymous character online
Yeah,
taking
yeah, definitely.
financial advice. It's bizarre. It's bizarre, and you're
Mhm.
right. And they believe that there's a shortcut. They believe there's a hack, and they found a way. But then you
Mhm.
know what? This is a guilty pleasure because on an annual basis, we probably make more than half our income cleaning up someone's mess. So
Yeah, that's
you
very
know,
true.
so in a way, oh my God, what are you doing? But well, somebody like me is gonna make a lot of money off of you. So
Yeah,
go ahead,
that's very true.
have your time, right? Do what you need to.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Going back to the remote working community, I was also thinking, even though there's so many more people who are joining the remote working force, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna travel much more. Not at all at the current time. Like, we
Yeah.
don't even know when traveling will go back to its normal stage that it was before. I think I saw something like almost 47% of like flights and stuff had gone down. So we don't know if
Mm,
people will be able to go back to the digital nomad hubs or not, and where the next destinations will be if traveling is again a thing. So I really can feel sort of that governments are now trying to race for citizens, like all those remote working visas and stuff. They're trying to actually make people to move there longer term so that they
mm,
can fall into tax residency, and that they um, will pay taxes there and get that money somehow.
mm,
And that way, instead of going through tourist visas and making money through tourist visa, which aren't a long-term thing.
mm.
So
I agree
that's,
with you. Yeah. I think that historically, when we look at it as a trend, like I interviewed this guy. He's a banker, a fund manager, and
mm-hmm,
he's from the U.S., born and raised in the U.S., but he traces his ancestry. So, like his great grandparents or something came over from Italy to the East Coast
mm-hmm,
of the U.S., and he found the records at Ellis Island, so this island off the coast of New York, where immigrants would be processed. And at that point in time, you didn't even need ID. You just say what your name is, they write it down, you do a basic health check, and welcome to America, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then afterwards, of course, things got a bit stricter. You needed a passport of sorts. Then you needed visas, and now it's just leveled up in terms of health checks or just basically certain countries. So a passport that was powerful, like the US, no longer is so, right? Now,
mm-hmm.
I think what is happening is there've always been people who work all over the world, like Australia. Like I was watching something on YouTube, like Chris Helmsworth. He has a home in LA, and he's also, his family's in Australia. He moves back and forth. You know, Johnny Depp. You know, lots of, I call names like that because those are names that people know. But it's always been a thing. If you could afford it, you move around and you have multiple residences. It's always been a thing. But within recent time, the internet has allowed people from less exalted backgrounds to enjoy that lifestyle. And countries allowed it, but then progressively, and again, this goes back to your point about the health crisis not being a creator, but just being a catalyst. Countries realized a while ago that these people, while they come in, it was fun in the beginning, but the net benefit is not there. And there was some pushback, and Thailand being the case study for it. They began that pushback years ago. So now it's allowed them to, okay, let's rethink this entire thing. And, you know, you have thought leaders like Thailand, which has recently come out with that visa. You know, you do 2 or 3 week quarantine in Phuket, then you can, and Barbados, Bermuda, and Portugal. So I think those that have rethought their situation and have restructured and put out product, I think they may be the hubs of the future, as opposed to those of the past that may not have been able to adapt. I mean, in Indonesia, I mean, Bali is its own thing, and they've always tried to operate autonomously from Jakarta, but there's been a trend over the past decade or so that is hard to ignore. Indonesia is heading in a certain direction, and Bali has been allowed to play its own game, but I don't think any longer. I think they will be called to toe the line, which is what has happened, because the governor of Bali was kind of saying, well, look at Phuket. Why can't we do that? Can we do this? Can we do that? And they seem to have been back and forth. And then after, I remember a couple of weekends ago, something happened. And then by Monday morning, he's like, that's it. We're closed until next year. So I guess they're the riot act. So for those who were doing it in the not correct way, so they're coming in on tourist visas, they're doing visa runs, those days are over. So I think it's what is being called for now is more structure and thought, and you definitely need to follow the rules, which makes it hard for those guys, again, going back to the cowboys who wanted to be tax-free. It makes their game a lot more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, it's so interesting to see, you know, what traditional digital nomads are going to keep up with it, and who's are lagging a bit behind, and who weren't a digital nomad hub before, and who might become one now. Like, you know, as you said, we're still waiting to sort of see some action from Bali, but no, they're going to close down. And Mexico, some parts, you know, that's massive for Canadians and US people as well. Medellin, Colombia, like nothing there yet. So yeah, it's really cool to follow along those trends and see who's gonna come up with new tax incentive programs basically as well.
Yeah, both with the immigration side and on the tax side. Again, feeding back to our earlier points about there being more opportunities for people like us who talk about basically compliance, whether it's compliance with immigration rules, compliance with tax rules for corporates and individuals, just making sure people follow the rules, because one of the other trends that's been playing is nationalism. So everywhere, especially when there's an economic contraction, history tells us they look funny. They look in a funny way at foreigners. They don't want foreigners in a way, because they're stealing our jobs. They're pushing up rent, you know, by renting these places, whatever. So, you know, if you're in somebody's country, you are a guest and you need to follow all the rules. You no longer have a position of privilege. So that is something that's gonna change the way things are done as well, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. It comes hugely into play what sort of passports you've got right now. And I'm the best example, I guess. I've been for 6 years in Australia, and now that all of this happened, I was like, oh crap, I better get on top of. I was just talking to my migration agent this morning and trying to figure out, what I need to do. I'm a resident, obviously, but being 6 years here, I could have had passport by now, but I messed it up myself by becoming a digital nomad. So now the clock restarted, and I'm like, oh, do I wait it out now here? Because I can't travel anyway, really, or yeah, what's the plan? So yeah, it's I think passports are becoming more and more important. Second, citizenship, and with that, like in citizenship by investment programs as well. And
They're flying off the shelf. So we worked closely, being based in Singapore, with others that are based in Singapore, like Henley Partners, Art and Capital, some of the big guys. There's a team out of Hong Kong as well. And going back to the point that you just raised, you're speaking to your agent. Obviously, in Australia, it's a heavily regulated jurisdiction. So to call yourself someone who speaks about immigration, you must be properly licensed to do so. Unfortunately, now anyone, they just figure out YouTube, they open a YouTube channel, and they're giving tax advice, they're giving immigration advice. They're not an immigration professional, they're not licensed in any jurisdiction, they're not a tax professional, they're not licensed in any jurisdiction. In other words, it's not about being, like arrogant, it's about having skin in the game, because we know we have a license. If we make a mistake, we lose our license. We will be hauled before court. We will be charged. We will be at least penalized. We can do jail time if we make a mistake. Whereas these guys, they come onto YouTube or they come onto whatever, and they're talking about whatever in the world with no consequence, painting with a broad brush. And they can't do that because they have no license. They have nothing at risk. And you pay them, you make real decisions based on what they tell you. Or based on what they have pitched on some YouTube video. And my God, that is, so it's like a mixed bag. So we're talking about things are getting stricter. So compliance is going to be a bigger deal, but the conversation needs to also be, who do you choose to help you with your compliance? Do you choose the guy with the best YouTube video? Or do you choose a guy who's licensed by the government in question? So.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. It's interesting to see what marketing tools can do these days, and who dominates with Facebook ads and Instagram ads. And yeah, it's very interesting how online businesses operate as well.
Yeah, in terms of the immigration space, that is again another minefield. I personally know clients who trusted the wrong immigration advisor, and they have lost 5 figures, 6 figures. I know somebody who's lost 7 figures by trusting the wrong person. But they had the most amazing YouTube channel.
Okay, interesting.
But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always say, it's if you know a little bit about SEO and the Google ads, you can have a landing page without ever mentioning any names who's going to sell you a great offshore company, and you can go and buy it for a couple of $100, but is that it? Like, that's never going to be the end of the conversation, especially not if you come from a high taxing Western country. It doesn't end there at all. Yeah, but some people just click on the first link on Google and that's it.
Yeah, and they try to do things on the cheap. I remember a client, he asked for a certain service, and I gave him a standard quote. And then he said, well, I found someone online who'd do it for a third of what you can do. So why are you charging so much? And I had to go silent, dude. If you want to trust your future and your kids to that guy online, good luck to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's funny that people go fishing for those sort of services as well. Yeah. From our perspective anyway, but.
But it's not just that. I was talking to another influencer in the digital nomad space, and forgetting compliance. It's there are a lot of people of dubious backgrounds selling like courses, in how to become a digital nomad and make $1 million while being on a beach. And so their thing is, well, I'm on a beach, there's my laptop and there's my cocktail, and I made $1 million. So they pitch uh Amazon FBA, affiliate marketing, something, Instagram, Shopify, whatever, and they swear you're gonna be rich, and it takes zero effort. But it's all
Yeah.
a scam. I mean, anybody who's promising anything for free or less effort or whatever, the get rich quick thing, it has always been with us, I guess, and it'll always be with us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've become somehow a phenomenon of that as well. I don't even know how, but I was getting to the point where I would receive 50 friend requests per day on Facebook and people just trying to sell me things. I was like, first of all, I've got enough on my plate. Second of all, I'm not really sure you are as successful as you're saying. Like, I would love to see, your profit and loss statement and stuff like that. But yeah, it's funny. And then, a lot of people can fall for that. Obviously, you're kind of selling the dream. And but I think I feel like this pandemic has also sort of wiped out, especially with Instagrammers and bloggers and all of that. Really, the ones who are going to come out of this are the ones that are really successful or really entrepreneurial and have sort of diverted and come up with new skills or new products or whatever. And yeah, and others are, there's millions of things you can do with remote working and being a digital nomad. You can be a freelancer, or these days you can work for big companies remotely. So yeah, I think it's really, the results have started showing up, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. The posers are finding it difficult to flex without any substance anymore. I went to a dinner last night for Digital Nomads. There were like 181 RSVPs, so it's a pretty big room. But I'm just talking to people on my table, and they have been, of course, all over the world. And everyone is being brutally honest. It's been a hard year. It has been really, really slow. But for them, to your point, it's all about really stopping and thinking deeply about what they're doing, whether it makes sense, and how can you pivot. Like I met a guy who was a performance coach, and now he does programming. Why? Because it wasn't working. He had no clients, right? So he's really thought about it. He did his courses, he did his studies, he did whatever, and now he's doing something else. So it's about being honest with yourself and looking for opportunities and recognizing there's not going to be any quick win. There's no get rich. It's about hard work. It's about exchanging time for money for most people. An honest day's work for an honest day's pay, so.
Yeah, definitely. It all takes time, I think, even success to get there.
Yeah. So interesting times, definitely. And we don't know where things are gonna go. So.
Not at all, but we'll be following it all along.
Yeah. All right, Kathleen, I appreciate you sharing your time, sharing your insight. And for those who want to reach you, could you remind us of what your website is again?
It's wandererswealth.com.
Right, and I had a look at that website before we jumped on this Zoom call, and it's just filled with videos and advice and helpful guidance for those who want to take themselves forward on the pathway to financial independence, right?
Yes, thank you so much, Derren, for having me. Really appreciated our conversation.
Okay, have a good evening on your side. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Please subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Our books and upcoming event are available at htj.tax. Email us at help@htj.tax to engage us, to advise on international tax or business matters.